A spoon slipped from someone's fingers and clattered onto a plate. That tiny sound was the only thing anyone heard because the entire restaurant had gone silent. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the same person. A black waitress, standing beside the most powerful table in the room, had just done something no one expected. She'd answered in her fifth language: French, Japanese, Mandarin, Spanish, and now flawless, formal Korean. The billionaire at the head of the table, a man who was used to owning every conversation, stared at her like the world had tilted under his feet. That waitress was Amara Okoye. That morning, no one noticed her when she arrived at work. She slipped through the staff entrance with a practiced ease, nodding to the dishwasher, hanging up her coat, tying her dark box braids into a low, neat bun. Her uniform was the same as every other server's: crisp white shirt, black apron, neutral black pants. Nothing about her clothing announced who she really was. To most customers, she was just another server. To the staff, she was the steady one, the one who picked up extra shifts, covered for mistakes, and never made a scene. Quiet, reliable, the smart one, they said, without really knowing why. To the powerful regulars, she barely existed unless a glass broke or a dish was wrong. Being unseen, she had learned, could be a kind of safety. "Morning, Amara," the line cook called without looking up. "Morning," she replied, checking the reservation list by the counter, out of habit. Her name wasn't on any of those little notes, obviously. Only the names that mattered were written there: chairmen, founders, influencers, old money, new money, loud money. The restaurant was more than just a place to eat. It was a stage. Deals were whispered there. Rivalries were managed there. Egos were fed alongside dessert. Amara had been working there for almost a year, not because she lacked ambition, because life had pressed pause on it. Her story didn't start in that dining room. "Staff meeting?" the manager barked suddenly, snapping her back to the present. They gathered near the bar. Servers, bartenders, hosts, all lined up. The manager, Mr. Park, mid-40s, always slightly anxious, clapped his hands once. "Listen up. We have a very important guest at lunch today," he said. "Kang Min-jae. You all know who that is?" A few staff exchanged looks. One of the younger waiters whispered, "The app guy?" and got nudged in the ribs. "He's not just the app guy," Mr. Park snapped. "He's Kang Group, tech, real estate, investments. He practically owns half the skyline." He tugged at his tie. "He's bringing 2 international investors. Everything needs to be perfect. No delays, no mistakes, no surprises." He looked around at them one by one. Then his gaze landed on Amara. "Amara, you're on table 1, he said. "You're the only one who never drops anything when it matters." A couple of coworkers smirked. One, a server named Hannah, leaned over and whispered, "See? Dependable queen." Amara just nodded. "Got it." She checked the time. 10 minutes to opening. She took a breath, pushed aside the echo of the professor who'd once said, "You'll be negotiating with world leaders someday," and focused instead on cutlery alignment and wine pairings. By noon, the restaurant was humming. Glasses clinked, low laughter floated between tables, soft jazz played in the background. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, bouncing off marble floors and steel fixtures. At 12:17, the room shifted. The glass doors slid open, and Kang Min-jae walked in. He was exactly the way the internet described him: mid-30s, tall enough to be noticed, dark hair styled just messy enough to look effortless, but not a strand out of place. Watch worth more than a year's salary for some people. Suit tailored so precisely it moved like it belonged to him and him alone. On either side of him, 2 men in immaculate suits followed. One was older, European, with silver at his temples and a smooth boardroom smile. The other was Japanese, sharp-eyed, his expression unreadable. They were already mid-conversation. "I told them if we buy them, we're not keeping their leadership," Min-jae was saying in Korean, laughing. "We're not a charity." The manager practically jogged to greet them, bowing slightly. "Welcome, Mr. Kang," he gushed in Korean. "We're honored, really. Your usual table is ready." Amara watched from the service station, face calm, pulse steady. Ready? Hana murmured. Always, Amara said. She picked up 3 menus, squared her shoulders, and walked toward table 1. Min-jae barely glanced at her as she arrived. His phone was in his hand, thumb scrolling.
An older European guest was struggling. His voice rose as he tried to explain something to a young server. No cream, he said in English. No milk, no cheese, nothing. Rien de lait, vous comprenez? The server looked panicked, flipping through the menu, searching for clues. I'm sorry, sir. Excuse me, Amara said gently, stepping in. May I help? She turned to the man and switched without thinking. Je suis désolée pour la confusion, monsieur, she said in fluent French. Vous souhaitez un plat sans aucun produit laitier? C'est bien ça? Relief flooded his face. Oui, exactement, he said. Merci. Je ne voulais pas être difficile. Je me sens juste un peu perdue. Amara smiled. Ce n'est pas un problème du tout, she said. Je vais en parler au chef, et je vous proposerai quelque chose qui vous
Then she answered in polished, natural Japanese. こちらの料理にはこの白ワインがおすすめです, she said. 味が繊細なので重すぎない方が合います. His eyebrows lifted. You speak Japanese, he said, now in Japanese. A little, she replied modestly in the same language, then elaborated on 2 specific labels on their wine list, why one might pair better than the other. This time, the silence at the table wasn't comfortable. The European investor glanced at Min-jae, then at Amara. Where did you learn that? Min-jae asked, the lightness gone from his voice. Amara turned to him. She answered him in formal Korean. 저는 언어학과 국제관계를 전공했습니다, she said evenly. 여러 나라에서 공부했고요. The words were simple. The implication wasn't. A Chinese businessman at a nearby table who'd been half listening while checking his phone.
Frozen. Hana stared, eyes wide, whispering, You never told us you spoke like that. At table 1, Kang Ming-jae's jaw was clenched so tight a muscle flickered in his cheek. He switched to Korean, looking at his investors. 괜찮아요, he said, trying to laugh. 언어 몇 개 할 줄 안다고 세상이 바뀌는 건 아니죠. 결국엔 여기서 접시나 나르는 거잖아요. He spoke loudly enough for her to hear. That was the point. He needed to reclaim the power he felt slipping. Amara set down the wine bottle carefully. She could have ignored it. She usually did. Instead, she drew in one slow breath, turned, and faced him fully. She spoke in English now, for everyone. I speak Korean. 3 words. They weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. A spoon clinked against the... How did you learn that? Not, what else can you do? Why? Why are you not where I think someone like you should be? Amara held his gaze. Because intelligence doesn't always come with opportunity, she replied, still in English, and humility doesn't require wealth. The words were plain. For the rest of the meal, table 1 changed. There were no more jokes about her pronunciation, no comments about girls who carry trays. The investors asked real questions about the menu, about the city, about other restaurants she recommended. Oddly, they directed very few of those questions to Kang Min-jae. He watched her work. He watched how she spoke to the kitchen staff with respect, how she moved between tables without losing track of a single detail, how guests suddenly made real eye contact with her instead of glancing past her. He watched the way the room's energy had shifted, not against him exactly, but away from the version of power he represented. When dessert plates were cleared and the bill arrived, he signed it more quietly than usual. As he stood, he lingered. You didn't have to embarrass me, he said softly in Korean, meeting her eyes. Amara wiped her hands on her apron. I didn't, she replied. You did that yourself. He blinked, almost like no one had ever said that to him. He opened his mouth as if to say more, then closed it again, turned and left with his investors. The private lounge was lit softly, empty except for one figure, Kang Min-jae. This time, he wasn't surrounded by investors. No staff hovered in the background. His phone was on the table, face down. He stood when she walked in. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. "I owe you an apology," he said in Korean. Amara folded her arms loosely, not aggressive, just there. "I judged you by your position," he went on. "I assumed I understood your story because of your uniform. I confused money with intelligence." He let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped for years. "And I talked about you like you couldn't even understand me," he added. "That was worse." She didn't rush to make it easier for him. Silence stretched between them. "I'm launching something," he said finally. "A foundation, global, focused on cultural diplomacy, language education, giving scholarships to people who understand more than one world." He paused, watching her carefully, looking for a reaction. "I have money," he said simply. "What I don't have is what you have, the experience of living." For the first time in a long time, Amara didn't replay the insults in her head on the way home. She replayed the moment she'd finally stopped pretending not to understand. "I speak Korean." 3 simple words that had changed everything, not because they'd impressed anyone, but because they'd pulled the mask off a very specific kind of power. Weeks passed. She thought about his offer. She researched the foundation quietly, saw news articles about it, saw skeptics questioning his motives, saw think pieces praising the idea. Some nights she came home from a double shift and dropped her bag on the floor, wondering if she was a coward for hesitating. Some nights she watched foreign news streams in different languages just to remind herself who she was before the apron. One afternoon, a regular, a woman in her 50s who always ordered the same dish, stopped her as she cleared a plate. "I heard what you did that day," the woman said softly, "with that man. My colleague was here. She told me." Amara's stomach tightened. "I just did my job," she said carefully. The woman smiled. "No," she said, "you finally did yours. And his." A month later, Amara walked into a different kind of building. Glass walls, conference rooms, a sign in the lobby that read Kong Cultural Foundation in 3 different scripts. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "How you spoke to me?" She thought about it. "No," she said. "Do you?" He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "Every day." He left the phone on her desk. "Keep it," he said, "in case you ever forget who you are." She didn't need the reminder, but she kept it anyway. The waitress he dismissed had never been uneducated. She had simply been unrecognized until she decided in 3 quiet words that she would no longer pretend to be deaf to her own worth. If this story kept you watching to the end, don't forget to